right, so World War II has left many examples of landscapes that were transformed due to exploitation and processing of fossil fuels. And in my opinion, one among the more interesting cases are relics of large synthetic fuel plants that were built by Nazi Germany at the end of 1930s, at the very beginning of 1940s. Those sophisticated installations were later bombarded, targeted by intensive Allied bombardment, especially since the middle of 1945. And in the post-war reality, no attempts have been made to restore them, rebuild them, and restart production. They were seen as obsolete, even though they were very sophisticated and expensive, because the production costs, their operational costs were very high, and they had relatively low productivity. But to understand where this idea came from, the idea to produce liquid fuel from coal, first we need to look at the historical context. So at the end of 1930s, about 90% of the energy consumed in Nazi Germany was produced from coal, and it was no different in other countries of Europe at the time. But when we compare the productivity of liquid fuels, here where it gets very interesting. So in 1938, a year before the war in Europe broke down, Nazi Germany produced 7 million tons of liquid fuels. Great Britain, its future enemy, 12 million tons. The Soviet Union, its ally at the time, and soon its little enemy, 29 million tons, and the United States of America, 164 million tons. So this situation was seen by Nazi authorities as an obstacle, as a danger to overcome, especially that most of the liquid fuels at the time were produced in Nazi Germany from crude oil that was brought from overseas. And it was obvious that in the case of imminent war in Europe, those supplies will be cut off. And the coal was only raw resource which was abundant in Germany. In fact, regarding raw materials, Nazi Germany was self-sufficient only in coal. And another thing is that if we look at the productivity of the United States, it means that only in 1938, the United States produced more liquid fuels than Nazi Germany during 5 years of this atrocious war. So that's where this idea about production of liquid fuels from coal came from. I will focus today only on one example. Like I said, there are many cases of such facilities, such plants. I will focus on the HydrierwerkePölitz. The site was built, the construction started in 1938 and it was finished on 15th of July 1940. It means that that was the day when the production of liquid fuels began. Far away from the future front lines and the nearest airfields, HydrierwerkePölitz seemed to be relatively safe. Right now it's located in northwestern part of Poland, but before the war it was Nazi territory. It was Nazi Germany. The plant itself had quite good logistics, like it was very well connected with sea through Szczecin lagoon, and it was also supplied through Oder river and other waterways with coal that were coming from distant Silesian mines. And of course, production could be also transported in that way using the waterways. Something broken. Okay, so first, let's look at the general context of the site before we'll see the plant itself. So when we analyze aerial photographs that were taken by US 8 Air Force, we will see that on the Oder River there are a large number of coal barges. They're going down the river flow to deliver the coal to the factory, and especially there is a large number of them at the photographs taken during the early stages of the war, and they are everywhere, omnipresent on those busy waterways at the time. So several coal terminals were built on the Szczecin way, where the barges were unloaded, coal was stored, and then later it was moved to the railway cars, and in that manner it was transported to the factory. And all bigger railway junctions at the time are either full of coal railway cars or tanks that deliver the production from the factory to the front or to other places. As I said before, factory was built 10 kilometers to the north from Stettin city, and it was the biggest city at the time, the most industrialized city of the region. So there were some larger and smaller businesses, all of them turned already to military production. So, for example, there were steel works, but there were also shipyards. There were several automotive companies. There was large factory that produced engines for Junkers aeroplanes. So many endeavors that were producing for military requirements, needs. So when we look at the aerial photographs on the Stettin harbor, the harbor was located in the heart of Szczecin itself, because like any other historical city, other river just runs through the city, through the heart of this old part of the city. So when we look at the early photographs, we will see that lots of warships, Kriegsmarine warships, are undergoing some reparation works in the floating docks. There are some U-boats. Some of the warships are waiting to be refueled with freshly produced diesel in the HydrierwerkePölitz. Oh, that's, for example, the shipyard, Vulcan shipyard, famous that because it produced, it built U-boats. There are 2 U-boats finished and 2 others under construction. All of those places, all of those sites were targeted later in the final stages of the war by intensive bombardment and razed to the ground together with the old historical part of the city and its amazing historical architecture. So in this matter, we can say that aerial photographs allows us to analyze, to interpret, to name the historical role of the places that do not exist anymore, that were never rebuilt because they were destroyed and no attempts have been made to rebuild them. And they allows us also to understand relations of those places that I often put in a distant, in the large distances, and they are related through their function, in this case, function of supplying HydrierwerkePölitz. At the very beginning of the building of factory, only 3 workers were employed, and they were drawn by subcontractors from different European countries. But soon after the beginning of the conquest of Poland in 1939, a large number of slave laborers started to come, and they will keep coming. So labor camps were built around the site, around the factory, which was here, to accommodate those newcomers. And soon they became the largest working force in the factory. And obviously we know that from eyewitnesses accounts that the conditions were very difficult, that prisoners were dying from overwork, from malnutrition, from frequent executions, from accident, and so on. So this history is no different. In this case, aerial photographs, historical aerial photographs, allows us to find the exact location of those former labor camps, as soon after the war they were demolished, and later on they were overbuilt by modernistic block of flats. So the memory about them just disappeared. But there's much more, obviously, to say about those camps than only to point out their location. When you look at the photographs from the later stages of war, you may see that many bombs drifted or were just by mistake dropped on those camps, and prisoners were dying, and later on those prisoners who survived were used to disarm unexploded bombs. It is often mentioned. This is, for example, Pommernlager, which was largely destroyed, in the larger part destroyed during one of the bombardments, and we can see burnt barracks and some bomb craters around. That's one of the penalty camps where prisoners that tried to escape were kept, and that's, for example, joint branch of Ravensbrück and Stutthof concentration camps. The prisoners were also used for hard labor in HydrierwerkePölitz. So on the 5th of September 1940, there was a first raid undertaken by RAF aeroplanes. The results were moderate, but it became clear that the plant is not safe anymore. It was just less than 2 months after the initiation of fuel production, by the way. So some countermeasures have been taken to protect the site. For example, large number of smoke generators were built around the plant to cover it. Many of them survived until the present day. You can see how they worked. That's B-24 Liberator flying over Pölitz. But due to analysis, based on analysis of aerial photographs from the era, we may say that the production of smoke was never sufficient enough to cover the whole facility and hide it from the eyes of Allied bombardiers. So you can often see some places, and of course, those smoke screens were also dependent on the strength of wind and its direction and so on. Those smoke generators emitted highly toxic, poisonous acidus gases, so they were devastating for natural environment. And here you can see that they're not working, but the vegetation around them is burned by those acidus gases. Obviously, also camouflage netting was used, but its efficiency was not good enough. We can see tanks, and this type of netting could not be used over all installations of the plant. To protect the site, there was a large number of barrage balloons used. So that's balloon. They were put around the plant from the late 1940s to the late 1943. After that time, they disappeared because it became clear that aeroplanes, Allied aeroplanes at the time, were flying at the high altitudes, far beyond the reach of those barrage balloons, so there was no point to keep them. In fact, they posed a threat only to so-called pathfinders, aeroplanes like de Havilland Mosquitoes that were flying to mark targets, dropping flares on those targets just before the beginning of the air raids. Another feature interesting here is the tank for gas for those balloons. Another way of creating distraction for Allied pilots was building mock-ups, fake refineries in the distance of 10 kilometers to the north and northwest from the factory. 3 such mock-ups were built. I will focus only on one because 2 others are very similar cases. So here where the thing starts getting very interesting, because those mock-ups were regularly photographed by Americans, month after month after month. And when I compare those photographs, I don't see any signs of destruction, like not a single bomb was dropped on them. But we got obviously modern technologies. This is the same place. So as you can see, the area was not transformed. It's still in the forest. The difference is that the mock-up is just overgrown. So here, when we use airborne laser scanning derivatives, we'll see that the fence around the mock-up is very well preserved. We can actually see the subtle relics of this mock-up. We'll also see the relics of anti-aircraft artillery emplacements, some trenches, some other emplacements here and here, but there's not a single bomb crater there. If single bomb was dropped there, or if even single bomb was dropped there, then we would see relics of those bombs. But for some reason, they were avoided. They were quite easy to, those mock-ups were quite easy to recognize during the daytime, that's obvious, but during the nighttime, reportedly, Germans were using different light effects to draw the attention, but as it seems, it did not really work. And in the 2 other cases of the mock-ups, the situation is exactly the same. Obviously, the main core of defense was anti-aircraft artillery emplacement, and quite interesting thing, the number of guns used to protect the facility was the same as the number of guns used to protect Berlin. So it shows the strategic meaning of the liquid fuels production, especially at the end of the war. Okay, we will not focus on this image because there is a lot to be said and interpreted from this image. It would take another hour or so. I will just say that many of those emplacements, Air Force, survive until the present day and can be registered with airborne laser scanning. So all those all those banks that were built to protect not only guns, but also Würzburg radars and search finders and searchlights and barracks and generators and so on. Many of them survived and can be still studied. We are in very good conditions. The term bombscape is often used by archaeologists interested in studies of modern conflict to describe the landscape that was transformed by intensive bombardment. And that's also the case when we look at the HydrierwerkePölitz. Many of bombs were dropped not only on the facility itself, but as I said, on the labor camps and also on the nearby villages, devastating natural environment, killing people and destroying whole villages up to a point that they were never rebuilt again. They were just overbuilt together with developing city after the war, together with growing population after the war. So the landscape was transformed and changed. But not everywhere. Like this is area that is adjacent to the south from the factory. It is still forested, and we can see using airborne laser scanning derivative that there is still large number of bomb craters that were dropped here. Even some trench is there as well. And in the area where arable fields are present, we can also see bomb craters as positive crop marks. So they are also quite clearly visible. Aerial photographs from the era allows us also to study gradual destruction of the plant. So we can see how the plant was gradually destroyed with every bombardment, but we can also see last desperate efforts to repair damages and restart production. And that's image from the second half of 1944, which shows that the factory was almost completely destroyed, and yet it still kept its production. Low level, but it still produced some fuel. Something happened? Okay. After the war, the factory was completely devastated. It was destroyed, and it became an enclave of the Red Army. So for several years after the war, the Red Army was supervising the area, and it scavenged the site for valuable recyclable materials and metals and so on. And later, the ruins of the factory were handed over to the Polish army. And in 1990s, at the very beginning of 1990s, after the collapse of the communism, the military supervision was lifted, and the area was just opened, and nobody cared about it. At the time, it became a kind of wicked, upside-down world where young people started to go, where some shady businesses started to happen, where police never went, where there were large illegal parties organized, and so on. And you can imagine that, this would happen inside those places. Those first visitors left lots of graffiti, different types of graffiti, more and less interesting graffiti there. And right now, the area is overgrown by vegetation, and it became a habitat that is protected within the Natura 2000 framework. So it's an animal habitat, and for example, if you go to one of the surviving air raid shelters and look at the ceiling, you will see thousands of scratches made by generations of bats that still live there and enjoy this place. Okay. And since the beginning of 2000s, a kind of a turn in approach to this place can be observed, more empathetic, more heritage-oriented, more oriented on victimhood. It happened together with establishment of SCARP Association, which was established by local history enthusiasts, and those people started to care about the site. They rented two air raid shelters, and one of those shelters is used as an exhibition room to commemorate the difficult fate of slave workers, while the other air raid shelter is used just to show some militaria that were found around the site after the war. Some information boards were installed, and there are also some guided tours among the ruins of the HydrierwerkePölitz, even though some of those ruins are quite dangerous. So to conclude what I presented to you today, I don't want really to repeat some ideas that were already written in many scientific papers about historical aerial photographs. So we know all the cognitive potential of those photographs. So just shortly, I will mention some of the ideas. So archaeological analysis, in my opinion, of abandoned Nazi industrial sites allows us to see a new dimension of their history, to create a new viewpoint and create new knowledge about those places. Those photographs which we analyze, historical photographs, surveillance photographs, contain a great detail of informations, and many of those informations cannot be obtained from other sources. So we always have to reach for those photographs if they are available. And in the case of deeply transformed landscapes, historical aerial photographs are often the last visual proof of certain events or existence of certain places. And among all those conclusions, the most important, in my opinion, is that historical area photographs can serve as heuristic tools. What that means? That means that they allow us to connect within the one narration many different places that are often distant from each other, but were in the past interrelated due to their historical purpose or reason why they were built. And the last thing is that today the site is quite eclectic place. Like I said, most of it is taken by ruins of the old factory, but there are several small businesses in the corners of those ruins. And one of those is just beside the museums, which I just showed you. And they produce their plastic dinosaurs. Actually, right now it seems that this workshop is abandoned. So I can imagine that for the future archaeologists of contemporary past, it may be quite a headache when they see those dinosaurs among the grassland. And that's all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for your attention.